Hey everybody, Foley here. Welcome to the weekly news recap, the 31st of March to the 6th of April 2025. So, as you've probably seen, this week was the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal. Or not necessarily reveal, since we've known about it and they talked about it already. I guess it's like the first major Nintendo Direct for the Switch, whatever. We're going to move into it. So, first up, we're showing off Super Mario Kart World, or just Mario Kart World. Full screen. Anyway, so yeah, we got to see a little bit more of this in motion. We got a lot more detail on how the game is going to work. So it is kind of a big open map now. So it's going to play a little bit more like something like the Forza series or the Burnout series and stuff like that, in that you drive around the map and drop into races and stuff like that. It will still have the typical modes you would have expected, like the Grand Prix tournaments and stuff like that. That's still a thing. What has kind of changed is that the tracks themselves aren't kind of closed loops anymore. There still are some closed loops tracks, but it does seem like most of the courses are just go from point A to point B as fast as you can, instead of, doing laps of a different circuit. There's a lot of different biomes, a lot of different themes being played out. 24 players at once, or at least 24 racers. I assume if you're playing it online, it could be 24 players. We also have some new things you can do. You can ride on rails, you can ride on walls. There's some new characters like that cow. Lots and lots of different things. There's like a cosmetics thing, I think, which is what we were seeing that looked like drive-thrus and stuff like that. Is that the drive-thru is, you pick up food, and when you eat the food, you'll get a random cosmetic. And if you have it already, tough shit. If you don't have it already, well, now it's unlocked and you can use it whenever you want and that kind of thing. You can drive free roam around the world map as well, just picking up cosmetics or dropping into different races or practicing different tracks, because the tracks are there freely available for you to drive in. So yeah, kind of interesting. I don't know about having the point A to point B races, because something about, I don't know, Mario Kart races, having them be closed loops was always interesting. But the way Mario Kart 8 works at this point, it has every track there has ever been. Like, at that point, you can kind of just look at Mario Kart 8 and go, if that's what you want, there it is. And now they're going to try and do something different with Mario Kart World, which is fine. I think that's kind of fine. A little bit they showed off during the Treehouse event, the Treehouse Live event afterwards, was they showed off this Grand Prix thing that we're seeing here, in that you effectively drive to the next race, essentially. So some of the... I think on the Treehouse one, the first race they did was a closed loop. And then once that was over, the second race was a point A to point B. In fact, all of the races after that were point A to point B races. It's kind of interesting because the way it was described on the stream was that you're driving to the next race. But you're not really. The drive to the next race, if you like, is itself a race anyway. You can see in the bottom left, well, it's there, it's gone now. You can see the lap indicator thing is really more stage of the race you're at. You're in stage 1, you're in stage 2, you're in stage 3, as opposed to you being on lap 1, lap 2. It's still kind of broken up that way. They're showing off the free row here. You can go off track and just go wherever you want. You might have seen earlier, there was a knockout type tournament thing. Just sort of a battle royale, I guess, because you're going to start with 24 racers, and then it'll dwindle to whoever's in the top 20 gets to continue, then whoever's in the top 16, the top 8, the top 4, and so on. And then the last 4, I think, ends up being a closed circuit race, and it's just whoever wins that is the winner. Anyway, there's still a lot to go into on Mario Kart World, but it will be a launch title for the Switch 2. So moving on from that, no, I keep forgetting Kotaku doesn't do that. Anyway, so we had a look at what the mysterious C button is meant to do. So this was something that people had pointed out on the initial reveal of the Switch 2 that there was this mysterious button. We didn't know what it did, and then we found that it's embossed with a C. What the C stand for, we thought maybe it was some kind of throwback to the GameCube controller or something like that had the C sticks. But no, it's a chat button. It basically just does Discord, essentially, on Nintendo Switch. So you can use it to just turn on and off your microphone and connect to up to, I guess, up to 4 people. It didn't specify how many people can be in a chat. Rather annoyingly, it does put them on the screen, so it shrinks your own gameplay, effectively. You can change that, but it does seem like the default is to shrink it and put them on the screen with you. So make it look like a Zoom call, effectively. There is going to be a camera peripheral to come with it, so you can get like a camera feed instead. They're trying to show off here the noise reduction that it allegedly has. I doubt it. I doubt it's as good as they're trying to claim it is. What would be interesting is if it's able to filter out the noise from the game itself. As you can see, the microphone is like right beside effectively the speaker for the Switch 2. So unless you have headphones on, it's entirely possible you're just going to be able to hear the other person's game, and they're going to be able to hear your game, etc. You can see here at the bottom, they're sharing gameplay at like 2 frames a second or something. They're all playing the same game at the moment, but you can, like, that's not required. You can play any game. It's just going to share whatever happens to be on your Switch 2 screen at the time. Whether that means you'll be able to share... Does the Switch have a browser? And if it has a browser... No, the original Switch doesn't have a browser, so I don't think the Switch 2 will either. But if it had... if over time it had like a Netflix app or something like that, you would wonder if there's some case of you not being able to share it because you're doing that. But I mean, who would want to watch a Netflix show at 2 frames per second? So there's obviously that issue there. So yeah, you can pop up their gameplay if you really want to. So this is already kind of possible on PS5. Can do this. It doesn't have like the Discord stuff or the Discord voice chat thing, but it does have like party chat and what have you. Game share. Some games have game takeover as well. I don't know if the Switch 2 is going to do that. I don't know if the Xbox Series has the similar thing. I don't know. I don't have an Xbox, so I don't know. Like, there are some cool things here, but dedicating an entire button just to do this seems a bit much. I feel like you could have done this through the home button, honestly. Just long press the home button to do the same thing. Anyway, giving over an entire button on your controller just to do that, it seems like a bit much. Anyway, there's the camera peripheral. That's the official one. There are a couple of third-party ones that I've seen already. The one that looks like a piranha plant. It's pretty cool. Doesn't mean I'm going to get it. One thing that you were probably expecting, since this is obviously online functionality, it's going to require a Nintendo Switch Online subscription. So that now also means that there is a button dedicated on the controller that requires a subscription, which is also a bit shit. It does also make you wonder whether or not Joy-Cons from the original Switch work, if peripherals from the original Switch work on Switch 2. There's been no confirmation whether that does or not. I am suspecting it doesn't. Even for games that are meant to be backwards compatible, you know, you would think the original Joy-Cons should work with that, because they don't need any of the new functionality. I guess we'll see over time. Anyway, that's what the C button does. It's effectively a button that requires a subscription. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, then we had a couple of different things that the console is going to be able to do. So game share or local play game share. So we've already seen that they talked about it on the Nintendo Direct last week. The virtual game card thing, where you can share your digital library with up to however many number of people. I forget how many it is exactly. And now this is a kind of local thing. So if there's a couple of you together and you have all your Switches, if one of you owns the game, all of you can play it. Again, not clear how many. It's also not clear if you have to be playing the game together, or if they can just play it even though it's on your Switch. Is that effectively just the virtual game card thing again? Does everyone have to download a virtual game card, but you're all local, so it's constantly pinging the owner to make sure that you're still a local thing? I don't know. We don't really quite know how it works exactly. But it does seem like it does work with the original Switch as well, because there's a Switch 2 here at the top. The bottom left is another Switch 2, but then there's the original Nintendo Switch at the bottom, the middle, and then the Switch Lite is on the bottom right. So this game share thing does work with the original Switch. It's not clear if the original Switch can be the owner, if you like, the originator of the game, if you're able to share from the original Switch, or is it only able to just join? Don't know. There's some extra details that we don't know about that. But because it's local network, you probably won't need a Nintendo Switch Online subscription, but I don't know, they might throw it in there. Anyway, deep dive into it then. So yeah, I'll just get it to play. I suppose we can talk about it in the background. So going into like the specs of the Nintendo Switch 2, what you can expect from it. So there's a couple of interesting things that we've kind of already known. The Joy-Con is bigger. In general, it is magnetized, so it doesn't kind of slide in the way the original Switch does. They kind of snap in together now instead, which means they're not... Can you really call it a Switch anymore? I don't know. The kickstand is now the full width, or almost the full width of the screen, instead of just the one leg that almost always gets broken. What else? There is a USB port on the top and bottom of the tablet bit. So if you are, if you're playing it in like kickstand mode, and you wanted to charge it at the same time, you couldn't do that with the original Switch. Whereas now you can with the Switch 2, because you can just plug the charger in from the top. It would also allows you to obviously dock the Nintendo Switch and have the camera connected to it at the same time, or any other peripheral, possibly. Okay, the high definition display, yeah, it is a 1080p screen. The original is a 720, so the Switch 2 is now a 1080, which makes it HD. 120, I think, refresh rate, which is pretty good. 120 FPS at most, which is pretty good. Like, a lot of games would struggle to pull off 120 FPS, which is... It's a question of whether or not how many games will actually be able to hit that. It is an LCD screen, which is a bit of a downer, because the most up-to-date Nintendo Switch SKU is an OLED screen, which is a much more vibrant screen. So it's a bit of a downer that they've effectively gone backwards on that. It is allegedly HDR. HDR on an LCD screen is a bit not great. They're showing off there is that the magnetize, it is also kind of clicks in. You need to specifically disable the magnets to get it to unstick. I guess we'll see how well that works going forward. The analog sticks themselves are a little bit bigger. They're also Hall effect, so they shouldn't have Joy-Con drift. Okay, the mouse thing, right? So they have shown off how the mouse control works. So we did kind of think that, yeah, is this a mouse thing? Because there was an optical sensor on the inside of one of the Joy-Cons. Both Joy-Cons, it turns out, have that optical sensor. Here's one of the games. We'll have a look at this later. But this is one of the games that's going to have the Joy-Con controls. Or it's going to show it off, at least. From what I have seen, it does kind of play exactly like a mouse, but the form factor isn't exactly comfortable for a mouse, you know? It's really narrow, and if you want to be able to both press the two buttons, because you're going to use the two shoulder buttons as left and right click, and if you also need to be able to press the side buttons to do other things, it's gonna, like, it's a horrible claw you're gonna have to make, basically. So I don't know if that's gonna stay as a gimmick. I feel like it will. I don't see too many games going out of their way to work on it. We did see, again, on the Treehouse Live stuff, Metroid Prime 4 was using mouse controls, so it was using mouse look, and the Joy-Con, the left Joy-Con to move around, and then the mouse look to aim and shoot effectively. And like you would expect that works fine because it's a first-person shooter. Like, it's perfect. It's almost the exact it's almost the exact use case. Some other games that kind of make sense that are going to be ported to Switch 2, like Civilization 7, makes sense for mouse controls. I'm just wondering how painful it's going to be to hold. Yeah, that's it, talking about the 2 USB ports. I think there was such a mention there of 3D audio. We don't know which technology necessarily it's using for 3D audio, but 3D audio is pretty good. Yeah, significantly bigger internal storage. So 256 gigs. You shouldn't really need more than that. If the games were the same size as the Nintendo Switch games, but it does seem like Switch 2 games are going to be quite a bit bigger. The dock up to 4K, but it'll be 60 FPS rather than 120 FPS. And the dock has a fan. So no more of your Switch becoming the surface of the sun anymore. At least mine would get extremely hot over time. Anyway, I don't think there's much more to the deep dive than that. Compatible with Nintendo Switch games, there is a bit of an asterisk there that we will get to a little bit later on what exactly compatibility means and what games are compatible with it as well. There was a Donkey Kong game there you might have seen on the screen that hasn't actually been technically hadn't been announced at the time, but it was announced like a couple of seconds later. There we have the release date. So the 5th of June 2025 is when the Switch 2 will be available to own and play and so on. You'll note a rather conspicuous absence of the price of the Nintendo Switch 2, which we will get to later. I'm only going to deal with what was on the live stream here. But there's a reason they left the price off. Anyway, so there's like some pretty cool things there and the gimmicky mouse controls. I mean, I know I have been accused of being a Sony fanboy, and there's certainly a little bit of a Sony fanboy to me. It does remind me a little bit of like the haptic feedback stuff of the DualSense. That is cool, and when it's implemented is really fun, but very few games have actually implemented it. So we'll see how much support the mouse thing gets. The Nintendo Welcome Tour. Do I have a trailer for this? I don't. Okay. So the Welcome Tour thing is effectively... I'll just blow this up so you can see it. It's effectively Astro's Playroom for the Nintendo Switch. So it's meant to be an introduce you to the console, show you like a couple of different features. You can walk around it as if it was an exhibit and that kind of thing. Point out the magnetic controls, point out all the things that Astro's Playroom kind of did to kind of show off the SSD and show off the 3D audio and show off all these things, which is fine. It's a cool idea. The problem is, unlike Astro's Playroom, which was pre-installed and free if you decided to uninstall it, it was still free to download afterwards. This thing isn't free. This is a paid premium instruction manual, effectively. How much it's going to cost, we don't know. We have the yen price, which translates to about $6 US. So we're probably looking at a tenner. More than likely, those rounded up. Of course, they're going to round up way too much. Could have round down, could have made it a $5. No. I'm going to make it a tenner. We'll see. I could be wrong. Maybe they'll make it a $5. But the point is, this shouldn't cost any money. This should be free. Like, come on. You're taking the piss, Nintendo. And as it's with the price, will continue to be a taking the piss. The fact that this has a price at all is ridiculous. Like, whatever it ends up being, doesn't matter. It's ridiculous on its face. But we'll get to the price of the games and the console itself later on. Honestly thought I had a trailer for this, but I must not. The game and the SD cards, there's not a huge difference here. It's just the color. It's red. And the original ones were grey. Don't know if they have a new taste, new flavor, a new horrible flavor to get you to not eat them. There is talk of the size of the cartridges, but again, we don't know the exact color. We don't know the exact internal size yet, like gigabytes, megabytes, whatever it happens to be. It's the wrong bottle. This bottle. Outside of the game cards themselves, there was talk about the SD card. So the Nintendo Switch 2 won't support the regular SD cards anymore. So these are the kind of external memory that you would have added to your Nintendo Switch to make up for the laughable 32 gigabytes that it had. So whatever SD card you were using in your current Switch won't be compatible. There are, I think, a couple of like almost like Switch branded SD cards, I think came out a few years ago. I think those are still valid, but not anymore. So they're using SD Extend or SD something, but it's a new type of SD card effectively. So that's what you're going to need to have for the Nintendo Switch 2. This does remind me a little bit of the PlayStation Vita that also had its proprietary memory cards. Didn't end well for them. Anyway, moving on. Switch 2 Pro Controller is effectively the same thing, but it does have, of course, the C button. The top buttons, the shoulder buttons are a different color. It says Switch 2 on it. There's not a whole other difference to it. One interesting thing, though, is that it does have rear assignable buttons. So you can't really see on the picture, but on the two legs at the back, there are two extra buttons that you can freely program and assign them to be whatever you want. If you find it difficult to reach certain buttons, you might find it's easier to put them on the shoulder buttons or put them on the sticks instead. Personally, I would put L3 and R3 on those instead because I hate clicking in the sticks. It's never felt good. I've never felt good clicking in the sticks. So that's what I would put in the legs. But that's me. You can obviously put in whatever you want. Again, not clear if you can use it as a combination thing. Like some games have you clicking both sticks at the same time. Can you just make that one button or two shoulder buttons? Or, fighting games occasionally have you pressing two buttons at the same time to do a throw or something. Could you just make that one button? It's not clear how programmable it necessarily will be. Anyway, moving on. The launch day, we already knew that. We looked at it. We'll get into the price later, but the price is listed here. They did not list it during the live stream, but the price is listed here on Kotaku. So the price is $450 US. And if you get it with Mario Kart World, it'll be $500 US. Now, despite that very high number, that is actually cheap for the Mario Kart World game, because the game itself is $80 US. You're saving $30 if you buy it through the bundle. Jesus Christ. Anyway, we'll get to the price in a later section. Moving on. All right, backwards compatibility support. So Nintendo revealed today that only select Nintendo Switch games will be backwards compatible. There was like an asterisk to say, it's select games and so on. Nintendo have, after the live stream, they did publish a list of games that are currently not supported on Switch 2. We will get to that list in a second. It's long, and there are some big games on it too. But one thing they did point out is that many games are getting a Switch 2 version. So pretty much all of Nintendo's first-party games are getting Switch 2 versions. There's going to be a Mario Party Jamboree Switch 2 version. There's both of the Zeldas, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom will be getting Switch 2 versions. Link's Awakening, I think, is also getting a Switch 2 version, and so on and so forth. There's a lot. Practically all of the Nintendo's first-party ones are getting a Switch 2 version. The Switch 2 editions of these. So I'll just play it. So the Switch 2 version of these games have like a bunch of like visual updates and some performance improvements and things like that. So both Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild will run at like 60 FPS, 1080p, and so on for the Switch 2. So the frame rate is significantly better. The draw distance is significantly better. You can see things from much further away. The loading speed is laughably faster on Breath of the Wild. It's hilarious how fast it is. They did do like a side-by-side loading race, if you like, of the original Switch version and the Switch 2 version, and yeah, it's It's no contest. It's so much faster. What else was there? There is an app thing, Zelda Notes. I think it's going to be bundled with the Nintendo Switch app already. It's kind of going to do two things. It's essentially just allowing you to track quests and things that you've collected and stuff like that. So clearly there must be some kind of save file syncing or something like that must go on across between the Zelda Notes app and the game itself. So whether they need to be on the same network or this kind of thing, I don't know. How quick it'll be to update and that kind of thing. We don't really know how well that's going to work. It does obviously require... Oh no, Nintendo Switch Online membership is not required to use Zelda Notes. Anyway, that will be for both games. It has things like tracking different things in games, different quests and stuff like that. It does have a kind of interesting GPS thing for quests and Korok seeds and stuff like that are, it will give you almost a GPS thing of go forward, this is it, then turn left, yada yada, and so on. Weird, but okay. I guess it's one way to get around the fact that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom don't really have a way marker or a wayfinder kind of thing. You can put a marker on the map and that's about it. I don't know, it's an interesting idea, but it's also kind of dealing with the fact that they just didn't implement that feature in the game in the first place. I don't know, it feels like it may be going against the ethos of the game itself anyway. Voice memories. They might be new, actually. Yeah, that seems like it's a new thing for those. Anyway, you can share blueprints for any of your contraptions, any of your torture devices you've made in Tears of the Kingdom. You'll be able to share them, and then people can download them and make them themselves if they have all of the requirements. You can send things to other players, send them pictures, track your stats. I'm just going to skip ahead. There's some things there. Medals, achievements, possibly. We've also seen achievements pop up on the live stream for Mario Kart World as well. So whether Nintendo are implementing their own achievement trophy system or whether it's going to be a game-specific thing, they haven't talked about it, so we don't really know. Daily bonus to get you to keep coming back. Gross. Amiibos, and I imagine there's a link to take you over to the shop so you can buy it yourself. So they'll be available on launch, the Nintendo Switch 2 editions. If you already own the original game, you can buy, and as it says there, an upgrade pack. So it's not a free update. If you already own the original game, you will have to buy an update pack. We don't know how much the update pack is. Nintendo first-party games, pricing-wise, for the Nintendo Switch 2 are a little all over the place right now. Mario Kart World is at the higher end at $80. Disgusting. But also the Donkey Kong game that we haven't got to yet, but the Donkey Kong game is a bit less for some reason, arbitrarily. Don't know why. And then the physical and digital versions are different prices as well. Mario Kart World Digital is $70. Mario Kart World Physical is $80. But it also seems like the physical version doesn't have anything on the cart. It's just a download key. So you're effectively paying $10 for plastic. The box, basically. Anyway, there's an upgrade pack. A lot of the games will have upgrade packs. Or a lot of the games that are from Switch 1, effectively. So Kirby Forgotten Land has this Star-Crossed World extension thing that's going to be part of this new Nintendo Switch 2 edition. And again, upgrade pack, you'll be able to play that yourself as well. It's not coming to the original version of the game. So it's the Star-Crossed World expansion will be exclusive to the Nintendo Switch 2 edition. Metroid Prime 4 will just have two different editions. So it'll have the original Switch and the Switch 2. There's no upgrade pack route for that, as far as I'm aware. You're just going to buy one or the other. It does have performance and quality mode, was shown off. So it does have. You can do 4K 60 FPS, is its quality mode, or it can do 1080p 120 FPS as its performance mode. So up to you what you want to do. But 120 frames per second is pretty good. Pokemon Legends EA also getting a Switch 2 edition. Yeah, so this is a Drag and Drive game. So this is effectively the 1-2 Switch, which was the game that was meant to show off all of the gimmicks that the Switch could do. So Dragon... The fuck was it? I can't even remember what it's called now. Dragon Drive or Drag X Drive or whatever is meant to show off all of the gimmicks the mouse thing can do. So it's effectively sport, wheelchair basketball, whatever you want to call it. From people who have gone hands-on with this, it feels like it is actually quite painful to do. Not only the claw grip, but it's both hands claw grip, and it has to be like kept flat with the surface you're playing it on, and having to do it at the same time and change and so on. It feels like it's gonna hurt to play. It is mentioned that it's an optical sensor, so you won't necessarily need to have a desk or a flat surface or whatever. It will still work off your legs effectively, or whatever way you decide to use the thing. Like, it should still work. It's an optical sensor. It should make a difference. It's really the question of how well it works. You know, you can technically use a mouse on your thigh, but it's, you know, you're not going to try to play a twitchy first-person shooter like that. That's not going to happen. Anyway. Then we had a kind of like third-party publishers, games that are going to be coming to Nintendo Switch 2. So Elden Ring will be getting a port, full feature. It's not like a cloud version thing or anything like that. Hades 2, whenever it eventually gets its 1.0 release, will be on the Switch 2. Street Fighter 6, as well as all of the DLC fighters up until now, so the first two seasons. So there's 26 characters in total, so also we'll have some interesting control options. Daemon X Machina sequel, so Titanic Scion is what it's called. It's kind of a mech fighter game. You can kind of customize your mech and so on. I feel like I was a little catfished by the original Daemon X Machina, because it seemed like it was this really high action, high speed mech combat thing, and when I played it, it's just very slow. I was like quite disappointed by the original Daemon X Machina, so gonna wait to see how this one turns out, I suppose, and see if it is equally as kind of slow and plodding as the first one. You know, because it looks like it's fast and twitchy and fun, and it just wasn't, or I was playing it wrong. I don't know. Anyway, that's Daemon X Machina something. I don't think it had a release date. I know it did. I assume that, yeah, this must be American dates, so 5th of September? Yeah, 5th of September. Not a launch title, basically. I didn't mean to fucking close that tab. It's gonna annoy me now. Gotta find it again. Split Fiction from Hazelight, already out on a couple of different platforms, but it's gonna be on a Switch 2 as well. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. Hitman World of Assassination Trilogy. The James Bond game that we know nothing about, but it'll be on the Switch 2. Okay. Bravely Default, which is the trailer I just clicked off there. So Bravely Default remastered. It's effectively the first game remastered for the Switch 2. This is a JRPG that I really wanted to play, but didn't get around to because it was on a console I didn't own. It was on I think it's a 3DS, and was exclusive to us for a long time. And then Bravely Default 2 came out, but I'm not gonna play the second one without playing the first one. Actually, I'm not even sure if the stories are connected. I think it's like a Final Fantasy thing where the stories are all separate, but they just have gameplay and a couple of like themes in common. Anyway, Bravely Default, from how it's described in the trailer, sounds like Final Fantasy 1. Really, it's the 4 warriors of light have to, avert a calamity or something like that. Anyway, I've always wanted to play it. So it being available, I kind of wish it wasn't exclusive to an extremely expensive console. So gonna have to see if that price comes down at all. Anyway. Yakuza 0 Director's Cut. It was not mentioned what is actually in the Director's Cut for Yakuza 0. Age of Imprisonment, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. So the Hyrule Warriors series is a Koei Tecmo Omega Force Dynasty Warriors type thing. So it's you versus hundreds, thousands of enemies all at once, and you just mow through them. It's a fun setup. The Hyrule Warriors games are some of the better ones because it's using the Legend of Zelda characters in the Legend of Zelda universe, so on. Age of Calamity was the previous one, and that was set before Breath of the Wild. So it's effectively set at the Calamity, the thing that kicked off Breath of the Wild, essentially. But it is a Dynasty Warriors game. So do it that is the gameplay. Like, it is you in a battlefield just fighting hundreds of enemies all at once. The Age of Imprisonment is going back even further. I mean, technically it's set before Tears of the Kingdom, but it's also technically set before Breath of the Wild and before Age of Calamity and before a lot of things. This is effectively the war that seals Ganon, more or less. It's that war. So we're going back very, very far. Anyway, did that have a release date? I don't think it did. It did not. Okay. Okay, so Nintendo Switch Online, some kind of updates that'll be coming for the Switch 2. The biggest one is GameCube games are making their way to Nintendo Switch Online. It will require the more premium version, the Premium Plus or whatever it is, pack for some reason. So hang on, I want to go back to the GameCube controller. You'll note on the top, this is a really weird thing that they decided to do. I don't know why they did this, but you'll see here, right, this button, this big kind of chunky button here that's covering the right shoulder button, that's meant to be mirrored on this side. That should be there too. And it is there, but it's a really tiny button for some reason. It's like the Joy-Con button on the Switch controller. Like, it's really small. I don't know why they did that. But yeah, there will be a Nintendo GameCube controller as well. That'll be both wired and wireless. However, it's only going to work on Nintendo Switch Online games. You can't use it for like the original GameCube or anything. That's a bit of a missed opportunity, I think. Not that there are many original GameCubes going around, but getting those controllers is difficult because they don't make them anymore. And having the opportunity to get like a new one would be good because they break kind of easily. Anyway, of the games that are making their way there, we saw Wind Waker, Soul Calibur 2 with Link. Soul Calibur 2 was kind of an interesting one because it came out on GameCube. It was GameCube, PS2, and Xbox One? Yeah, I think. And then every platform had their own guest character. So the GameCube had Link. Xbox had Spawn, I think, for some reason. Not sure why. And PlayStation had Heihachi from Tekken. And I always felt like, again, I guess my PlayStation fanboyism is showing, I always felt like Sony had the better one. Because Link just played like Sophitia, really, and Spawn just played like Necrid. They really did feel like clones of each other, whereas Heihachi played like Heihachi. He was a distinct character, effectively. Now, it helped that both games were made by the same developer. Anyway, what's really good here, though, is that there are a number of games on this list that, if you were to buy them now, if you were to try to get them on eBay or anything like that, they go for a lot of money. Like, they're really hard to get. Chibi Robo, in particular, is very hard to get your hands on these days. So that's all by itself. Pokemon Colosseum also really hard to get your hands on. Yeah, GameCube controller that has a weird... I don't know what this button is called, but it has a weird one of these. I don't know why. You can't see it in the picture. Okay, you can kind of see it there. Why is it tiny? Why is it tiny? Why didn't you make it as big as this one? I don't understand. Did the original have this as well? There's no C button either, so I mean, there's this, but there's no like chat button or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe they're on the top. They might be these buttons on the top. Oh, hang on. Now you can see it. Look how fucking small this button is. Why? And the chat button is there. Yeah. Okay. And there's the home button and the take a picture button that was destroyed because Twitter. Anyway. USB-C port, which is good. Z button, ZL, it must be. Anyway, I don't know why they made it like that. It's currently available there. It's also exclusive to people who have a Nintendo Switch Online membership. Currently, at least. Whether they'll open that up later on down the line. Hopefully they will, but right now, no. The Deltarune chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 will all be on Switch 2 whenever they come out. Borderlands 4. Civ 7 we talked about with mouse support. Cyberpunk 2077. We don't know if it's just going to look like DLSS horrible shit. We do know that the Switch 2 supports DLSS, so we'll see. Final Fantasy VII Intergrade. So that's Remake with the DLC on top of it. So it's not Rebirth. Rebirth might make its way to Switch 2 eventually, but right now it's just Remake. And then a bunch of other games showing off. Silksong was very briefly there and took over the live chat for a little while. Allegedly, it's coming out this year. No actual release date. It just said 2025, and it's going to be on Switch 2. We'll see. The US stream for the Nintendo Switch 2 had some weird technical hitch in and around this spot. So a couple of trailers didn't actually show off on the actual live stream. So I went to go look for them. Otherwise, the UK stream was fine and the Japanese stream was fine. I don't know why the US one had a freak out. Anyway, this is the next Astroneer game. Star Seeker, I think. Star Seeker, that's what it's called. Looks like it's a fun kind of multiplayer survival type thing. I'm not familiar with the Astroneer series, so forgive me my ignorance. One thing I did like though, I wanna highlight this guy. This guy who just gives himself to Jesus take the wheel and drops himself in the water. I like that guy. He's pretty funny. He's a cool dude. And I think this is the first time the game has had water as well. So the water is new. Anyway, I like that guy. He's funny. Anyway, moving on. Some other games that were eaten by the glitch, effectively. So Enter the Gungeon 2 is a pretty cool top-down twin-stick shooter roguelike. That's a lot of buzzwords, I know, for the indie space. Enter the Gungeon was one of the first really good roguelike Renaissance games. So getting a sequel to it seems like it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. Anyway, we don't know too much elsewhere about the sequel, but it's going to be PC and Switch 2, and almost certainly other platforms as well. I think we did Age of Calamity and we did Bravely Default. So we're going to skip ahead, because there's, again, a bunch of other games we've already talked about. Okay, this is the one, other than the Nintendo Switch 2 price, and the price of the games and money in general. The other story that came out of the Switch 2 livestream is the FromSoft game that's an exclusive to Switch 2 that people are not sure if they're meant to be mad about it or not. Okay. Because a lot of the trappings that people saw of this sure looked like it was Bloodborne. It sure fucking looked like Bloodborne 2, really. And I think a few too many people might have gotten their hopes up about that. There's certainly a lot of Bloodborne here. You're obviously missing the voiceover, that kind of thing, but there's a lot of talk about blood. Dusk Bloods in particular is what the game itself is called, but it's very close to the concept of Vile Bloods in Bloodborne, which is effectively vampires. And it does seem like that's the kind of theme they're going with for Dusk Bloods, is that you're some kind of vampire type creature. And you are competing with other vampire type creatures to acquire the first blood. And again, the old ones, the old blood, there's a lot of Bloodborne here, basically. It really feels like, I mean, look at that fucking shot. How is that not Bloodborne? Like, there's a little too much Bloodborne here, if anything. Because it does sort of feel like the time when Sony published Demon Souls. And then they weren't willing to do Demon Souls 2. And From Software just went, okay, well, fuck you, we'll do Dark Souls instead. And it's like, this is kind of the same thing, really. And you're kind of wondering if this is a similar idea, aside Sony aren't willing to do Bloodborne 2. And they're just going to go, well, alright, well, fuck you. We'll just do Bloodborne with a different name. Anyway, as it turns out, the game itself is a sort of mini battle royale type thing. It's a PvPvE thing, not unlike Night Rain. Night Rain is a bit more of a roguelike, whereas this Dusk Bloods is a bit closer to a battle royale. But it's you and up to 7 other players are thrown into an environment, and it is a race to, one, like, kill each other, but also there are different objectives you need to complete at the same time. Like, you might all have to work together to defeat a big boss, or you might collectively have to have defeated this many enemies or collected this much stuff, and so on. But at the same time, you're also competing with each other to be the winner, effectively. So it is very much a multiplayer-focused game. Night Rain, that isn't out yet, is also very clearly a multiplayer-focused game. So there is the concern that maybe from on high, From Software have been given the directive to go more into the multiplayer sphere. There was an interview with Miyazaki recently to say that no, that's not the case. We are still working on single player, action RPGs that we are known for. The Dark Souls, this is the Elden Rings. There's definitely an Elden Ring 2, He didn't say there's definitely an Elden Ring 2. I am saying there's definitely an Elden Ring 2. But yeah, I kind of feel like the Dusk Bloods and Night Rain or whatever are just there to sort of... It's maybe doing the games a disservice, but they are there to sort of fill the gap and also give From Software the opportunity to practice multiplayer without having to, put it into like a new game and sort of guess if it'll work well. They can sort of practice it with these smaller games and see how it works. And if these games are going to be like online servicey type things, they can obviously adjust it, and then whenever Elden Ring 2 comes out, they can have a much stronger multiplayer component to it. I don't know. That's my feeling behind it. Anyway, Dusk Bloods, I don't think had a release date. No, we just have this rat. Just have this rat with wings. Anyway, we're nearly there. There was a lot of news, guys. There was a lot of news. Kirby Air Riders. So this is a sequel to Kirby Air Ride, which was a GameCube exclusive, and I don't think it was ever ported to anything afterwards. So this is one of the last Kirby games that I can't remember his name, but the Super Smash Bros. Guy, developer. Fuck, I can't remember his name. Anyway, I think that was the last Kirby game he worked on before he went into the Smash Bros. Mines. And he's coming back to make the sequel, Kirby Air Riders. I am not familiar with the games myself, but I am familiar with the Smash games. And they're very good. So I'm thinking this will also probably be very good. Anything I've ever heard about Kirby Air Ride is that it's not appreciated for how good it is. And I think that effectively means it has a bit of a cult following, but maybe didn't. Like critically, I think it probably did well, but commercially maybe it didn't. I don't know. Anyway, Kirby Air Riders. It does look like it's Kirby Mario Kart to me, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Again, I'm not familiar with the series, so I don't know. Similarly, I don't think it had a release date. Sakurai, that's his fucking name. God damn it. I couldn't think of his name. Anyway, yeah, this year, some point. Doesn't look like it's a launch title, though. Alright, Donkey Kong Bonanza, I think, was kind of the last thing that they showed off. So this is the Donkey Kong game that I've been referencing up until now. So this is effectively a new Donkey Kong game. And it does look like they're trying to redo Donkey Kong 64. Effectively. And maybe make it good this time. I don't know. So they're not going down the Donkey Kong Country route. You know, a lot of the more recent Donkey Kong throwback games have been like Donkey Kong Country, been side-scrolling, platformer type things. Whereas this is really more of an open 3D adventure type thing. It's got a little bit of Mario Odyssey to it, in that you are collecting... You're collecting, like crystal bananas, bananiums, or something like that. It's some sort of mineral that inexplicably is formed in the shape of a banana. Like, that's that's kind of the gist we're going with here. But it works a little bit like Odyssey's Moons, in that there's like little puzzles dotted around the map for you to like complete and collect these, you know, bananas effectively. Probably the big standout for the game though is this: just you can fucking destroy everything. Almost. There are some things that you can't destroy. But like the environment is like completely deformable. It does remind me a lot of Red Faction, and I don't think Red Faction got enough credit for what they tried to do in their games. So there was the Geomod engine for the Red Faction games. This was going back a while. Red Faction's fucking PS1, PS2 game. But you could effectively deform that environment. You know, you could come across a locked door and you could shoot around the door. You know, like shoot into the wall and then go around the door that way, or dig underneath it and stuff like that. And some of the later Red Faction games even had you like doing demolition on different buildings. Like you could, like the buildings would conform to real world physics, and if you took out their structural supports, they would collapse correctly. That was all really impressive. It was all super fucking jank as well, though. So it does seem like Nintendo are aiming to just do that better, basically, with Bonanza. The Switch live stream, the Treehouse live stream, it does look like it's a lot of fun. Anyway, 17th 7th, so again, not a launch title. 17th 7th, July, it's a whole month later. Yeah, so the last thing was the bundles. There's a bundle with Mario Kart World, but we already talked about it. It's going to be $450 for the Switch 2 without anything, without any games. And then if you want to get it with Mario Kart World, it's $500. But as is noted here in the box, it's a full game download. It is not a cartridge. So you're actually only saving $20 rather than $30, because it's an extra $10 randomly to have the box with nothing in it. Okay, thanks. Anyway, I think that's the last thing, because the last slide on these is just go backwards. Yeah, okay. Go back to the start. Anyway, that's the Switch 2. We will come back to more Switch 2 news, because it's going to be in the industry bullshit section, because there's some fucking bullshit that came out of this thing afterwards. Anyway. So before we get to that, though, it is coming up to... So it's the second week in the month, which means Xbox Game Pass is getting a refresh. So Xbox Game Pass or not a refresh, update, I guess, editions. So the first week for April, or actually this might be the entirety of April, I'm not sure. Anyway, we're looking at South of Midnight. So for the Ultimate and PC tiers, South of Midnight, Borderlands 3... Sorry, Borderlands 3 is coming to standard as well. So South of Midnight, Commandos Origins, Blueprints, one of the Hunt Showdown things, are all part of the Ultimate PC tier. South of Midnight and Commandos Origins and Blueprints are all launch games. They're all day one new releases. And then Borderlands 3, Diablo 3, been around for a long time. Diablo 3 is a very good looter action RPG. Borderlands 3 is Borderlands. Hunt Showdown, I think that's the new Hunt Showdown, which I'm not super familiar with. All You Need Is Help is kind of a moving out Overcooked kind of thing, but not as stressful. It's just like everybody working together to complete various puzzles and stuff like that. Still Wakes the Deep is a pretty cool, spooky, atmospheric walking sim in some ways. We played it on the channel. It was pretty good. Wargroove 2 is a deck builder, I think. It's a battling deck builder thing. Anyway, those are some of the games you can play soon. What if you want to play something right now? Well, you play South of Midnight, which is on the Game Pass. So South of Midnight is from Compulsion Games. I forget what the last game they made was, but this is an Xbox exclusive. Xbox and PC, I think, exclusive. So South of Midnight is kind of an action-adventure thing. This is set in south of the US, but not Texas, the other south of the US, I guess. Not the cowboy south. It's more like the swamps and bayous side of the south. I don't know. Maybe that's super stereotypical and racist. I don't know. Hopefully not. Anyway, from what I've seen from reviews, presentation is very good. Story is interesting. Like folklore and culture and that kind of thing is really shown off really well. But some downsides to it is the combat is a bit rote and maybe a bit meh. Not bad, just not that interesting either. Be honest, I kind of find most games with combat is not very good usually. But I'm expecting every game to be Devil May Cry combat levels. They're just not going to be, so I'm always going to be disappointed. Anyway, but it does look interesting, and I am kind of curious to see how well the stop motion works. I've talked before about stop motion, that stop motion in video games does kind of just look like bad frame rate sometimes, if it's not done well. So, we'll see. Maybe it'll work out better for them. Inzoi, speaking of frame rate, Inzoi is talking on its early access release. I think it was actually last week, its early act, but whatever. The launch trailer was today or this week. So Inzoi is meant to be The Sims killer. It's effectively how it's been built, but unlike The Sims, where you're mostly controlling one person or one family, you're kind of controlling the whole city and everybody in it. In Inzoi, this is not a good trailer. Mostly because the first part of the trailer looks like it is very bad frame rate, only to not be very bad frame rate, or this is just a pre-recorded video, which is probably more the case. Anyway, it is The Sims, but like high fidelity, uncanny valley graphical level. Again, from gameplay, it does seem like it's pretty fun, pretty interesting, but also you're gonna need a pretty high-end PC for this not to run like shit. So they clearly have a ton of optimization to do, or they're just expecting that by the time it hits its 1.0 release, that the average PC will have caught up. I don't know. And then last thing, again, speaking of having your PC probably explode if you try to run it, Last of Us 2 has its PC release, so it's been ported by Nixes, however you pronounce it. It's effectively has been relegated to just doing PC ports at this point. It used to be that they would do like remakes and stuff. Now they just do ports. So yes, another version of The Last of Us Part 2. Now on PC. I wonder if they'll try to like release it like 5 times like they did with the other Last of Us Part 2 on PlayStation. Anyway, it's got the usual, upgrades and frame rates and fucking 3D audio and FOVs and who knows what else. Anyway, I think there is an additional ultra-wide was what I was actually trying to think of. The no return thing is their kind of roguelike thing they put into it recently. I think there's extra story stuff for the PC. It is also coming to the PlayStation version, but actually might not have been extra story stuff. I think it was extra characters for the No Return. I think that's what it was. Anyway. Unfortunately, though, it is now time to talk about the worst parts of the Nintendo Switch 2 livestream. The part they didn't talk about. Okay, anyway, Nintendo Switch 2's editions of Switch games like Zelda and Kirby cost $80! Some classic Switch titles are getting Switch 2 upgrades, but at a price. So, yeah, that fucking price, that fucking sticker shock for everybody. So, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, the Switch 2 edition, will retail for around $80. Breath of the Wild, $70. Why there's a random $10 difference? Or like ordinarily you would say because Breath of the Wild is a much older game, but that hasn't stopped Nintendo before from charging ridiculous. Like, try to buy Tropical Freeze. It's still like fucking $60 for some reason. Anyway, Nintendo Switch 2 editions of a lot of the games: Super Mario Party Jamboree, Tears of the Kingdom, Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, a couple of others will be $80. Some of them will be $70, still not entirely sure why. Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza both have different pricing models depending on whether you buy them physical or digital. Mario Kart World physical is $80, the digital copy is $70 for some reason. Donkey Kong Bonanza, $65 digitally, $70 physically. There's only a $5 difference between those two. We're not entirely sure what's going on here and why they have different prices and so on. The Switch 2 edition games are distinct from the standard Switch 2 backwards compatibility and need to either be purchased separately or upgraded to for owners of the Switch 1 version. So you can play your Switch 1 game on the Switch 2, but that's not the Switch 2 version. Right? This is kind of the same thing as playing your PS4 game on a PS5. Right? It's not the PS5 version you're playing the PS4 version. And like the PS4 PS5 situation, for some of the games, there's a Death Stranding Director's Cut, Ghost of Tsushima's Director's Cut, and so on, have an extra tenner if you want the PS5 version. That's essentially what's happening here, but we don't know if it's an extra tenner, or if it's an extra 20, or it's an extra whatever. We don't know what the upgrade pack pricing is, especially when, Tears of the Kingdom is $80, Breath of the Wild is $70. Is the upgrade pack similarly $10 cheaper on Tears of the Kingdom on Breath of the Wild? Nintendo hasn't announced how much each individual upgrade will cost. Both Zelda games subscribers... Oh yeah. So if you subscribe to Nintendo Switch Online, you don't have to pay for the Zelda upgrades. Now, it's just Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Doesn't include Echoes of Wisdom or Link's Awakening. So it's the two big open world games that everybody knows. And then the really big sticker shock of Nintendo Switch 2 costs $450 or $500. That's so much fucking money. Holy shit. Now, yes, if you do the maths and you do if we adjust for inflation and we go back, it's actually not as bad. It's still bad. It's still the most expensive one. It's still the most expensive Nintendo console. Even if you go back and adjust the fucking Super Nintendo, which would have been, inflation-wise, I think that ends up being the most expensive one. Or rather, has the highest number. But even at that, Switch 2 would still have a higher number. Like, it is still the highest one. And that's not also taking into account the fact that fucking everything costs more money now. And your salary has not gone up. And adjusted for inflation, everything else was adjusted for inflation. You know what wasn't adjusted for inflation? Wages. So your whole adjust for inflation argument is pointless because wages didn't go up with it. So it is very expensive. It is very much pricing people out of the hobby in some ways. Will Nintendo probably get away with it? Yeah, probably. But it's really the case of this being a knock-on to Call of Duty next year being $80, GTA 6 being $80, $90, $100 because they know they'll get away with it. Like, again, slippery slope argument. Oh, they need to increase prices because inflation. And it's like, no, you don't. People don't have the fucking money. And you do know that so much of the money that you put towards the game just goes to the pockets of the people at the top. It's not going to the developers who made the game. They're just getting their salary, which, remember, has not been adjusted for inflation. Anyway, speaking of horrible prices, you think that's really expensive, but guess what? It could get worse. So Trump shocks with massive new tariffs that could make the Switch 2 cost more than $600. So in the US, and I mean, to be fair, this is kind of an international story at this point, so you're almost certainly aware of it, that the US government has put out blanket tariffs on basically every country it does any kind of trade with. It's 10% across the board, and then on certain countries it's way, way, way more than that. And in particular, it's going to hit China and Vietnam. China and Vietnam is where a substantial number of tech components come from in the first place, but it's also where a substantial number of just tech, fully furnished, fully completed products also come out of. Vast majority of consoles are manufactured either in China or in Vietnam, or partially done in both countries. And a lot of studios would have, or not studios, hardware manufacturers would have moved their production, would have moved their factories and stuff out of China during Trump's first term, effectively, because he put up big tariffs on China at that point. They moved it over to Vietnam because they weren't subjected to these big tariffs, so they could, get around it in that situation. But there's no getting around it now because every country has been hit with them. So what you have now is the Switch 2 without the tariffs, $450, $500 with Mario Kart World. If you then apply the, 40-something% on Vietnam, 46% on Vietnam, 34% on China, and so on, it pushes the Switch 2 north of $600 at this point. Companies can choose to pass on much or all of this tax in the form of price hikes, which they absolutely will. They're not going to eat that cost. That's going to go on to the consumer. Many of the original Switch consoles were manufactured in China, but Nintendo began sourcing from countries like Vietnam and elsewhere after trade war threats during Trump's first term, seemingly to avoid precisely this scenario, but it's not going to help because it's going to get hit anyway. So Switch production has been shifting to Vietnam and is around 50-50 versus China currently. This is from financial analyst David Gibson. We would expect more production to shift to Vietnam with the Switch 2, but it takes about 6 months or more to gear up. If the mix does not change, then prices will go up 35+% for US consumers. So a lot of the talk with the tariff stuff is bringing manufacturing back to the US. That was the excuse they're using for it. Really, it's just to enrich the top 1% of whatever. But anyway, let's go with the excuse of bringing manufacturing back. These kind of factories are so complex and bespoke for a lot of these products that getting them up and running is going to take years to do. And not only that, you will need a workforce that is talented enough to work on it. And since the US is going out of its way to gut its Department of Education, you're not going to have those people. But let's say arguably you did have those people. Or you could somehow construct the factory that you didn't require talented people to do it, and you could get away with it on minimum wage. Minimum wage in the US is substantially higher than it is in China and Vietnam. So that's still a lot of money that's going to have to be pushed onto the consumer. Because the production company's not going to eat that. They're going to push it onto their client, whoever it is, Nintendo. And Nintendo will then push that onto the customer. So you're going to see even higher prices if they did actually do manufacturing in the US. So no matter what way you skew this, you're either waiting 6 years for the Switch 2 to be manufactured in the US and to then also cost more money, or you don't get a Switch 2, I guess, or you do what's suggested here, which is import it from Europe. But then you're taking Switch 2s from me. You shit. They cost us. Do you see how much they cost? And you want to push the money? You want to push the price up even further? I I hate you. Anyway, this won't just affect the Switch 2. Obviously, this, as I said, great amount of technology comes out of China and Vietnam and a lot of Southeast Asia because it's cheap to manufacture it there. Whether ethically or morally you agree with it being that cheap to manufacture it there, it is. That's why they're there. And these tariffs are just going to bring the cost up to you, the customer. Anyway, with the tariff announcement was after the Switch 2 live stream. It was also after they announced the price of the Switch 2. And they had announced pre-orders would be starting some stage this week, I think, in the US. That has now been cancelled for the US. So US pre-orders won't be possible for the Switch 2 right now until Nintendo decides what they're doing with the tariff situation. Whether or not they'll change the price, you don't see too many companies announce a price and then change it straight away. Like, it's not typical, but these tariffs are also not typical either. And as we'll talk about later on in community things, they're getting a ton of backlash on the price as it is. Never mind what it'll end up being if the tariffs if they stick. So we'll see how that works out for them. As it stands, Japan, Europe, effectively everywhere else, pre-orders are available. But from what I've seen, there's either technical difficulties or back-end shenanigans going on some websites, because it's been kind of difficult to confirm a pre-order. Now, I don't have a spare 400 or whatever it ends up being in euros, for 500 euro probably, something like that. I don't have that to spare, so I'm gonna be waiting for the Switch 2 to come down or fucking get a refurbished one or something. I don't know. Anyway, that's not the only bad news. Over 120 Switch games have compatibility issues or just won't start up at all on the Switch 2. So they were talking about the Switch 2 is backwards compatible with a selection of Switch 1 games. Now we know what the selection is. Anyway, so should support most original Switch games. However, two new lists from Nintendo seem to indicate that over 100 Switch games will have various issues or just flat out not work on the upcoming Switch 2. So they published their two lists, which we'll get into in a second. So some games will either start but will then have in-game compatibility issues. So what does that mean? Does it mean you can get to the main menu and then nothing? Can you get like halfway through the game and then it just breaks? They didn't go into details on what in-game compatibility issue means. And then startup issues, again, similarly, we don't really know if that just means it just doesn't fucking work at all. Like, you press the launch button and it just says no. Or does it try to launch and then fucking hard locks the Switch? Or, like, what does that mean? Clearly it means it doesn't play, right? We could probably get that far with it, but what specifically happens, we don't know. Some small element of good news is that it is currently being investigated. So they are still looking into workarounds or something for that. So we get into the list. So these are Nintendo Switch games that start on the Switch 2 but then have some compatibility issue inside of it. So there are some like pretty big games there. Alan Wake Remastered, Alien Isolation, Fall Guys, probably a big one. Just Dance. I mean, there are like massively huge games or anything. Stumble Guys. If you can't play Fall Guys and you can't play Stumble Guys, that's not great. And then there's some games that are in like Japanese that I have no idea what it says. But yeah, like are they huge games? Not necessarily. The 30th Anniversary Collection of Street Fighter is a bit of a bad one to not have. Fall Guys is probably like the big standout to not have it working. Factorio maybe for some people, but I feel like if you're playing Factorio, you're probably playing it on PC. Anyway, issues are being investigated. They'll see if there's some issue with it. I thought when the list was kind of, some games were picked out and just said these games don't work on compatibility. I figured it was some kind of online issue. Because a lot of the games that were pointed out were like heavily online games, like Fortnite, like Fall Guys, like Valorant. No, is it Valorant? League of Legends? Something else that was like a very online game, and that's what I assumed. But I don't think all of these games have that kind of online issue. Anyway, those are the games that will launch, but something goes wrong with them. And then these are the ones that just won't start at all, which is a much longer list. I've got a lot of the Arcade Archives things that are like Konami stuff. Batman Enemy Within is a Telltale game. Botany Manor is pretty new. It's kind of odd that that one's in there. Dead by Daylight actually was the one I was thinking of, not League of Legends. Dead by Daylight, not working. Doom Eternal. They have Doom the Dark Age coming out soon, so they probably want to get that one fixed pretty soon. The original Final Fantasy, but not any of the other Final Fantasies, which is a really odd one. Either that or they're just lumping Final Fantasy 1 to 6 in here together. I don't know. Fortnite, we'll come back to Fortnite in a second because you can see it has a different status. I'm obviously just picking things out. Jurassic Park Classic, Little Nightmares 1 and 2. Neverwinter Nights. It's a very good game, but I don't think anyone's particularly bummed that it's not working on the Switch. And I thought there was one other like big one. Sorry now, I thought there was a bit. I mean, any of the Jackbox games, oh god. Not the Jackbox games. Warframe, that'll be a bad one, alright, for them not have working. Okay, no, it must have been Fortnite is the one I was thinking of. Anyway, so Fortnite has a different status. It doesn't have this issue as being investigated. It has a Nintendo Switch 2 version is planned instead. So Epic kind of came back to say that, yeah, there are startup issues, or there will be startup issues with Fortnite on Switch 2. We are not planning to patch the original Switch version of Fortnite for compatibility. You will instead have to get the Switch 2 version of Fortnite. Now, again, we've talked about how Switch 2 versions of games have required update packs or upgrade packs. Fortnite is a free-to-play game, so that should be moot. You shouldn't need to buy an upgrade pack. So that's one way that they're going to get around it. I have a feeling a lot of those games will probably do the same thing and just go Switch 2 version instead. Whether they will similarly charge, we don't know. A lot of games that did the PS4 to PS5 change didn't. They didn't charge. Like, it was kind of a big stink when Sony did it with Death Stranding and with Ghost of Tsushima. And I don't think they're the only ones that have that upgrade thing. Upgrade path. Like, there are like the default was free. You know, you already bought the game. I'm just going to give you a way for you to keep playing it on your new console. So we'll see how that works out. But as you can see, like, it's a lengthy enough list. There aren't like massive heavy hitters on it, and you'll note none of them are Nintendo first party games. You didn't see Super Mario World or anything like that in there. Like, it's none of those. Because either they work fine, or they're gonna get an upgrade or an update or whatever for it. So the question of why there are compatibility issues in the first place, what's so different between the two hardwares and so on, it is a very different hardware setup between the Switch 1 and the Switch 2. So much so that technically you're not actually playing the Switch 1 game on Switch 2, you are playing it in a virtual emulator instead. So the Switch 2 has effectively a Switch 1 emulator on board, and that's what's playing all the Switch 1 games. And that's why there are compatibility issues, because emulators aren't perfect. They're virtualizing the hardware, concessions are made, not everything is one-to-one. Some, issues get thrown up, and this is one of them. If you've ever played any older games through an emulator, you might notice that they don't quite play exactly the same. Like, there are graphical artifacts, there are odd interactions with some things. Like, they're not 100% perfect. Which is why we would always push for preservation, that you keep these consoles so that they work, or that you get the developer themselves to make a build that works and not have to rely on emulation. But that costs money, and it wouldn't make a lot of money, so that's never going to happen. Anyway, we're gonna leave the Switch for a little bit, but we will be back. We'll be back later. But there was other industry bullshit going on in the meantime, so now it's time to talk about the worst parts of video games, the video game industry. So, investors demand Ubisoft to renegotiate Tencent's subsidiary deal and initiate legal proceedings. So, we kind of figured this was coming because it seemed super fucking shady what Ubisoft did in the first place. So, to remind people, or in case you've forgotten or weren't here in the first place, Ubisoft, or Yves Guillemot's family, effectively, in partnership with Tencent, have created a new subsidiary from Ubisoft, inside Ubisoft, and then transferred their best IP, effectively, their best performing IP right now. So, like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six were all transferred to this subsidiary instead. And on top of that, it's not covered by like shareholder something. I don't know the exact legal thing, but effectively Tencent are like 25% owners of it, and the Guillemot family are the other 75% owners of it. So that seemed like pretty illegal. It seems like pretty like we're just gonna hollow out the best part of the company and leave the shareholders with nothing, with rabbits, and that's about it. So a minority shareholder and a growing coalition of shareholders have issued an open letter and request legal proceedings against Ubisoft and Tencent over this subsidiary deal. So the open letter is from AJ Investments, or shareholder AJ Investments. They are a kind of activist shareholder. They have been after Ubisoft for a while to effectively just get the Guillemot family out, because they feel that they are not good stewards for the company. Arguably, they're right, but they are a like very small shareholder, so they don't have a ton of sway. So they are trying to get other shareholders on board to like get a little bit more of leverage on this kind of thing. Anyway, so the letter demands that shareholders, that Ubisoft hold an extraordinary general meeting, which is effectively an annual general meeting, but not annual. It's an emergency, effectively. Emergency general meeting might be another way to describe it. To give shareholders the right to vote on the subsidiary deal. So this is a deal that's been done between Yves Guillemot and Tencent, and not with the shareholders. So the shareholders didn't get a vote on this, is essentially what they're saying. They would like to renegotiate the Tencent deal and have it restructured into a direct asset sale. So Tencent would have to buy Assassin's Creed, or would have to buy Far Cry, or have to buy whatever. They're not just transferring it across. If you want it, you gotta buy it, basically. Which would essentially mean the subsidiary would have to be its own thing. It wouldn't be a subsidiary anymore. It would have to be a spun-off, distinct company. At the moment, shareholders have no clarity how the deal that was announced last week will eventually benefit shareholders of Ubisoft in any way. Can't imagine how it would when they siphon off the most best performing IP at the moment. Resolution 2 is distribution of an extraordinary dividend, which again, extraordinary general meeting isn't an annual general meeting. Extraordinary dividend isn't an annual dividend kind of thing. Essentially, pay us. You can do the subsidiary, but you need to pay us like money. And we already have agreed, because we know how much Ubisoft have put in, and we know how much Tencent have put in, so we know like 3 billion or 4 billion, I think, is how much the subsidiary, how much money was put into it. So they're saying the dividend should be like 3 billion. Either way, money. Pay the shareholders for this value you are extracting out of the company, and you don't just get to steal from the company, effectively. Shareholders are not sure whether they will get a significant benefit from this transaction. Ubisoft's share price fell by more than 20% on unusually high volume. Not entirely sure what that's meant to mean, but effectively, when the subsidiary deal was announced, stock price went down a lot. Normally, when a company makes a decision that you think will be a good thing, the stock price will go up. So the stock price going down would suggest that This is not a good thing for the company. Anyway, this signals a clear verdict from investors. The proposed deal is deeply flawed, structured to bypass mandatory public offer rules, and designed to entrench control by the Gimo family, who now hold less than 10% of the company's economic interest. So yeah, there's a... I'm not sure this is a hostile takeover so much as just theft, outright theft. But I do believe something similar was done at Studio Zaum, Disco Elysium. I know I bring up Disco Elysium a lot, but I do think like almost this exact same thing happened. And we've seen the fallout on that. All right, anyway, moving on. Embracer Group's Eidos Montreal studio confirms more layoffs, this time affecting up to 75 people. So, Eidos Montreal are the Tomb Raider people, the Deus Ex, the newer Deus Ex, the newer Tomb Raiders, and so on. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy was theirs as well. So they'll be laying off up to 75 members of staff, saying it does not have the capacity to entirely reallocate them to our other ongoing projects and services. Yeah, my hole, you don't. Anyway, these layoffs follow 97 job cuts from Eidos Montreal last year, so they're treating themselves to a few more layoffs. Sure, why not? Today we informed our studio staff that we are going to let go up to 75 valuable members. They're so valuable, we're happy to let them go. As one of our mandates is coming to an end, not entirely sure what that's supposed to mean. I guess project is finished? Or a support role maybe is wrapped up? I don't know. It is not a reflection of their dedication or skills, but unfortunately we don't have the capacity to entirely reallocate yada yada yada. You do. Fuck you. You do. Anyway, these very talented, highly experienced experts are going to enter the employment market. If they're so... Why wouldn't you be doing everything in your power to keep them? Anyway, we are working to support them through this transition. Eidos Montreal stays committed to deliver its other projects currently in development, yada yada yada. The last game Eidos Montreal released was 2021, which is Guardians of the Galaxy, and they haven't released anything since. They were working on a Deus Ex game, follow-up, third game in the Adam Jensen kind of saga thing, but that was scrapped when Embracer shit itself, effectively. If you recall, they were supposed to get a new cash injection of like $2 billion and then spent the $2 billion and then didn't get that cash injection. So they really fucked all of their employees over who were in no way responsible for that deal, but they're the ones who got fucked over. Anyway, Eidos Montreal are currently working with Microsoft on a couple of things, I think. They're working on the Fable reboot, anyway. They're a support partner. And I think they're working on Perfect Dark as well. I think that's them, anyway. That might... Oh, wait, no. That's Crystal Dynamics. Crystal Dynamics are doing Perfect Dark. And Eidos Montreal are helping on the Fable reboot. We don't know what else they're working on, though. Currently, I think they're working on Tomb Raider as well. There's a new Tomb Raider from Amazon Games. Anyway, moving on from there. Union workers at Fallout and Elder Scrolls Company ready to strike against Microsoft after 2 years of haggling. So, after this QA union formed about 2 years ago, they've been trying to get a deal on but mostly it's around remote work, but it's also around outsourcing and wages in general. And the union has basically said that Microsoft are being shitheads and we're just going to strike. If we can't come to a deal in the next couple of days, couple of weeks, we're going to strike. So the union has voted for strike action if they are unable to thrash out a deal. They've been haggling over things like remote work options and outsourcing game testing for nearly 2 years. They are now prepared to down tools if their concerns are not addressed. So this is effectively the end of 2023 when this union formed. Microsoft did acknowledge the union at the time, and you could charitably say this was Microsoft, playing along, or not playing along, sorry, being charitable. This is Microsoft saying, yes, of course, we want our people to feel like they're getting the, they're working somewhere where they're appreciated and so on. The less charitable way to look at it is that they were trying to close out the Blizzard deal. And one of the sticking points was that Activision are notoriously, and were, and still are, notoriously anti-union. And if Microsoft took them over, would they then effectively continue the anti-union stuff? And to get the deal through and to get rid of that issue, they basically agreed to a neutrality agreement or neutrality policy with any new unions to basically say that we'll acknowledge the union, and we won't try to bust it or anything like that. But a lot of that, it was felt it was just so they could get the Blizzard acquisition done, or the Activision Blizzard acquisition done, and that they didn't really think of unions were a good thing. Anyway, so last year the union did have a 1-day strike because they didn't adequately address employee concerns over the return to office policies and the outsourcing practices, which is the same thing they're still trying to hash out right now. According to a statement from the union, their members are continuing to take a stand at the table over better wages, workplace improvements, and key concerns, including a lack of remote work options and the company's replacement of in-house quality assurance work with outsourced labor without notifying the union, which is very much an anti-union playbook thing. Is to gradually phase out union workers and replace them with non-union workers, which is like categorically anti-union. Anyway, more than 94% of the union have approved their leaders to kick off a strike if Microsoft don't, stop being shitheads, effectively. So senior QA tester Zachary Armstrong says, underpayment and costly return to office initiatives have caused many of us to put our lives on pause because our income does not match even the rising cost of living in the cities where ZeniMax insists we live and work to maintain employment. None of us wishes it to come to this, but if Microsoft and ZeniMax continue to demonstrate at the bargaining table that they are unwilling to pay us fair wages for the value our labor provides to our games, we'll be showing them just how valuable our labor is. So the big issue with the return to office stuff is people would have moved to take advantage of a lower cost of living where they could still do their job and their wages would go further, buy more groceries, be able to buy a house in the first place, like any of that kind of thing. And they're insisting that they come back to the office. And to come back to the office would mean they would have to move because the commute would be too much. And then even with that, some return to office policies require that you live within X distance from the office. That is definitionally a decrease in their quality of life. Their money will not be going as far anymore. And if they're not going to adjust the wages so that they can live in the city, live in the location where the office is, then we just can't work for you anymore. Which is, I think, kind of what they're wanting. They're wanting you to quit. But anyway, Associate QA tester Aubrey Litchfield adds, despite being one of the world's largest corporations, we've had to continuously fight for what should be the bare minimum. Paying your employees a livable wage as a multi-trillion-dollar company is the least they could be doing. However, when addressed at the bargaining table, Microsoft acts as though we are asking for too much. Workers are choosing not to start families because of the uncertainty of finances. We've released multiple titles while working fully remote. When will enough be enough? Never. This is how the fucking growth at all costs shit. They think it will just keep growing forever and ever. And as is pointed out a lot of the time, the only thing that keeps growing forever and ever is cancer. And that kills the host eventually. Anyway, Microsoft did have an update, but it's corporate garbage. Anyway, they're an important, integral part of yada yada. If they're so important and you agree that they're so important and integral, why aren't you treating them better? We respect the team's right to express their viewpoints, but not to actually agree to any of their viewpoints. We are deeply committed to reaching a fair and equitable resolution for us, and not for them. I'm obviously adding all of these extra things in. Anyway, I wanted to get to one particular point, though. There's been substantial progress. We have presented a package proposal that we believe is fair, that the union does not believe is fair. If accepted, it would result in immediate compensation increases. Okay. Doesn't say by how much. Even more robust benefits, doesn't say what those benefits are, and is alignment in the company's hybrid model of 3 days in office, it would still require return to office. It would still require people to uproot where they've moved to. It would still mean a decrease in their quality of life. It's not acceptable. Anyway, we look forward to continuing this progress. Yeah, I bet you do. Anyway, last thing, it's a slightly better news, maybe? I don't know. EA veteran Adolf. Okay, EA veteran Adolf Christensen, whose parents hated him, I guess, is the new CEO of Starbreeze. Okay. There's a joke somewhere of having EA and Adolf in the same company. Anyway, I'm not smart enough to come up with it. Will be taking charge of Payday developer Starbreeze to turn the company into a true multi-title studio. A true multi-title. We have 2 titles. That's my plan, to get more than one game out. The news comes around a year after Starbreeze ousted then CEO Tobias Jorgen, probably said that name wrong, with Payday 3 underperforming following a torrid launch. So Payday 3 launched pretty shit. Arguably still not doing great. But I guess the plan is for that to be a little bit better. I joined Starbreeze with great enthusiasm for the company's current and future projects, not the least the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons title. Just news to me. I look forward to continuing the work of expanding the Payday franchise further and building Starbreeze into a true multi-title studio. We will get more than one game out, I promise. Fucking dire things. Alright, anyway. Last thing we're going to take a look at. So I did say we'd get back to the Switch 2. So in community things, the Treehouse live stream that I've been talking about, the live chat, they didn't really care what was on the screen, because the live chat was just endless prompts for them to drop the price. And that is all that was in the live chat. It's like a handful of like shitheads saying to raise the price, but for the most part, everyone else was saying, fucking drop the price, Jesus Christ. I think there might have been 1 or 2 guys that were actually saying something about the game that was on screen at the time. But no, the vast majority of the live chat was drop the price. Like almost every single message was some variation on drop the price. Livestream is facing a tough crowd as its chat is spammed by folks demanding Nintendo drop the price. The welcome to our hardware demo is not being free could also be a culprit. So it's like $70 for Mario, or sorry, $80 for Mario Kart World, $450 for the console. The fact that the welcome tour thing costs money at all, and so on. It is pretty much a solid wall of price moaning since the Treehouse kicked off. So that's not great. So you're not the only one thinking that $450 for a Switch 2 is a bit much. Like, way too much. And depending on how the tariff situation turns out, could be substantially more than that for the US. On top of how much the games cost, and then on what that will do for game pricing in general. GTA 6 is going to think, I can get away with $80, I can get away with $90, and so on. And the question, of course, is will people actually do the whole vote with your wallet thing? Not as many as you might hope, because Nintendo. Nintendo do make good games. Arguably, if there's anyone worth paying for, it is Nintendo. But you would hope people would take the kind of outrage at the pricing, and the pricing that for the US in particular that it's going to end up being, that they might actually make a stand on it, but they won't. I wish they would, but I don't think they will. Anyway, last thing I would take a look at, companies. Speaking of companies not listening to their players, Baldur's Gate 3 themed Stardew Valley mod hit with takedown by D&D owner and then was eventually put back up. So Baldur's Village, which was a kind of Baldur's Gate 3 / Stardew Valley crossover, was made by a Nexus mod user, BV. Was uploaded on March 8th, added like 20 characters, new locations, shops, special items, story events, bunch of other stuff. Even prompted Sven Vinky, Larian CEO, BG3's Baldur's Gate 3's director, Clearly so much love went into this. This is amazing work. Then, on the 29th of March, we had this mod is under moderation review and was no longer downloadable. Wizards of the Coast was responsible for sending a DMCA takedown notice against the fan content for infringing on its ownership of Dungeons & Dragons, which Baldur's Gate 3 is based on. Now, there is a kind of almost recurring refrain joke in Dungeons & Dragons spaces, tabletop RPG spaces, which was like, Dungeons & Dragons would be great if Hasbro would just fuck off. If they would just let Wizards do their thing and not keep coming back in with their corporate shit. You could arguably say that for pretty much everything, but it is in particular that Hasbro do not understand the tabletop RPG scene at all. Anyway, this is again before it was put back up. This is the mod creator themselves saying, hopefully this is an oversight from Wizards of the Coast, who often use external agencies to hunt down violating content, and they will revert their decision. Fingers crossed for Baldur's Village. Then it got back to Sven Vincke, again Baldur's Gate 3's director, who was very much not impressed with what Wizards of the Coast have done. Now, to be clear, Larian Studios no longer has any connection to Dungeons & Dragons. They're not making Baldur's Gate 4. Somebody else is going to make Baldur's Gate 4. If there's even going to be a Baldur's Gate 4, we don't know. But they're not working on any more Dungeons & Dragons things, so they don't really have any sway here. But for his part, he said, free quality fan mods highlighting your characters in other game genres are proof your work resonates and a unique form of word of mouth. In my opinion, they shouldn't be treated like commercial ventures that infringe on your property. Protecting your IP can be tricky, but I do hope this gets settled. There are good ways of dealing with this. And either Hasbro, took the bad press and decided to, change it, or it really was like an overzealous agency setting out a DMCA, But it was put back up very shortly afterwards, like 2 or 3 days afterwards. It was put back up. So you can make an argument either way. You will leave Mario Kart. Anyway, so that was weekly news recap for the 31st of March to the 6th of April 2025. So pretty much the Switch 2 episode, effectively. I'm whelmed, I guess, by the Switch 2. Like, I wasn't hugely blown away by the live stream in the first place. Mario Kart World looks interesting, maybe, but I don't have 23 other friends to play with, so... And I'm also not super into racing games in the first place. Donkey Kong Bonanza, I'm more interested in the technology behind it, like how they're doing the deformations and how that's being handled in memory, because allegedly it remembers all of the destruction you've made. So it isn't like a case of if you walk far enough away from a location that it gets deloaded from memory and then come back. It allegedly will load in the destruction you've already caused. It doesn't just like put it all back to normal. Like keeping that in memory is interesting. I would be curious to know how they're doing that. But gameplay wise, like, it looks fun, sure, but I'm not like dying to play it or anything. And then otherwise, you might have noticed there aren't a ton of Switch 2 launch games. It's right now, I think it's just Mario Kart World. And then there are like Switch 2 versions of games that are already out. Like there's a Switch 2 version of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Kirby's Forgotten Land, like that kind of stuff. But otherwise, yeah, not hugely interested. I don't know what I thought the C button was going to be, if it was going to be something like really cool and innovative or whatever, but it turning out to just be chat was like, really? An entire button just dedicated to it? As we pointed out, it requires a subscription as well, so it's a button that requires a subscription now. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I was pretty whelmed by the whole thing. Not underwhelmed, not overwhelmed, whelmed. I'm in the middle. The pricing has certainly put me underwhelmed on it because, like, it's a concern around what this will do for the rest of the industry, really, rather than necessarily just the Switch and just Mario Kart World and whatever. Like, if it was just a handful of games, as I've mentioned, Mario Kart World looks interesting, but I'm not, like, dying to play it. Like, I don't own Mario Kart 8. Like, it's a good game. I don't disagree that it's not a very good game, but I don't own it. Like, I didn't bother buying it. Like, similarly, like Super Mario Odyssey, like, I do have it. I haven't played it, but I know it's a very good game or whatever. Like, I could say the same thing about Donkey Kong Bonanza and what have you. Like, I can live without it. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. My point is, I guess I'm trying to like the PS4's reveal. I felt, yeah, I'm gonna get this. Like, everything I'm hearing is very good. PS5, the specs seemed really interesting, but then the price was like, oh my god. And then the Switch 2 is like I'm not seeing amazing games. PS5, to be fair, I wasn't seeing amazing games either. And I was never going to buy an Xbox in the first place, so I wasn't particularly paying attention to any of their launches. I don't know, basically. It really is going to be a case of, are Nintendo going to do anything about the price? Backlash. Will they leave Mario Kart World as it is, and then going forward, games will be $70 instead? I don't know. I do think they're going to have to do something, particularly for the US and the tariff situation. What exactly they end up doing, I don't know. We'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, there is a Mario Kart Direct on its way, not next week, I think it's the week after. Something else I was going to talk about. I can't remember now. I can't remember. Something else I was going to talk about there. Anyway, Switch 2 things, we'll wait. It's kind of a wait to see what is going to happen. A lot of the live stream was missing information. And some of it made sense that the information wasn't there, because it was a bad news to give people, like, the price. Like, they clearly knew the price was going to be an issue, because they didn't have it in the live stream. They went out of their way not to say the price. Didn't give a price for the games either, or anything like that. There was no mention of money at all on the live stream. So they clearly had a problem with that. Or that rather, they clearly knew it was going to be an issue. But maybe they didn't think it was going to be as big an issue? I don't know. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see how it works out for them. Outside of that, the compatibility stuff I think was always going to be a problem because of how they're running Switch 1 games on the Switch 2, because it's an emulator situation. There was always going to be compatibility issues. I do think that most of the games are just going to get a Switch 2 version instead. And a lot of the bigger games are free to play anyway. So it's not like you're going to have to buy an upgrade pack or anything. There might be an issue with, like, moving your save data across or something, but again, I don't play Fortnite or Fall Guys, but presumably it's your save data or whatever is all in your account. Like, wherever you log in, it's just there. Like, I don't think it's sitting on your console. Like, similarly for Warframe or Dead by Daylight or whatever. Dead by Daylight, maybe? The DLC? That might be an issue. All right. You have to pay for like the costumes and that kind of thing. Like, they're gonna have to do some work in the back end database stuff to, like, connect the Switch 2 version to your account and then make sure any of the DLC is also there. I wouldn't think they'd have you re-buy the DLC. And if they do, that's a really good way to lose a lot of players. So I doubt they'll do that. Not knowing how much the upgrade thing will be. As I said, the PS4, PS5 when it was $10. And I kind of feel like I would spend $10 for I wouldn't be happy about it exactly, but I would for, like, Zelda. Like, just the loading times alone for Breath of the Wild would be worth it. Um, Now, I don't think they should be charging, to be honest, but it's also I'd be curious to know actually if the loading times are faster with the Switch version. You know, if you just play the Switch version on Switch 2, is the loading time just faster in general? Like, if that is the case, then maybe you don't need the upgrade. I guess it would be a case of the better resolution and stuff like that, and whether that is like required for the update pack, or does it just get a natural boost? I would think it wouldn't get a natural boost. But loading times it should at least, but I guess we'll see. If it's emulating it, maybe not. Anyway, there's a lot of I don't know the Switch 2, and it's still a while before it'll be out. It's not out until start of June. So there's still a while left. There's still like time for more information to come out. So I wouldn't get too worried about it just yet. Wait until it's almost out. Then you can get worried about it. Anyway, outside of that, yeah, nobody really wanted to put out any updates while the Nintendo Switch 2 news was coming out because they knew it would just get buried. So there weren't a lot of updates outside of Nintendo. Industry bullshit. The Ubisoft subsidiary thing sounded shady right from the beginning. I'm very curious to see how that works out, because it really just feels like stealing. Like, it is a publicly traded company, so you are in some ways stealing from the shareholders at that point. Not that I really give a shit about the shareholders, but I really don't want Yoshimo to be still in video games, to be honest. I'd be happy if he was gone. Anyway, outside of that, more layoffs. Like, have I done a weekly news recap where we haven't talked about layoffs? I feel like we haven't. I think I'd have to go back pretty far to find one where I didn't mention layoffs. Anyway, we're gonna leave it there. I imagine we'll be hearing more about the Switch 2 later on, probably next week as well, and all the way up until the thing is out, and then we'll be hearing even more about it and so on. So, watch the space, I guess. Anyway, that's it from me. Trying to get my usual refrain. I'm trying to get back into game streaming, but it's just not happening. As I said, I am trying to outfit a new apartment, and there's a lot of like construction and renovation shit going to be happening soon that I'm going to have to pay attention to, keep an eye on, and maybe muck in on as well. So yeah, I'm kind of hoping, because God, I need a fucking break from this stuff, but it does take up a lot of my time. But anyway, we'll see if I can get back into a relaxing and completely non-stressful video game stream. Anyway, I'm going to head off. Have a good rest of your day, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye.